a high-speed rail network between Quebec City and Toronto with stops in Trois-Rivières, Laval, Montreal, Ottawa, and Peterborough. It'll span 1,000 kilometres with 100% electric trains that will reach speeds of 300 kilometres an hour.
Hey, and welcome to today, where we've got a couple things that I want to talk about. First things first on the list is towards later on, I'm gonna just bring up little tiny things going on in the day. But after all of that, I'm gonna get to the main portion of what I want to bring up today, which is how Trudeau is increasing our debt, and also Mark Carney is quite like Trudeau in that he is two-faced. Kind of obvious, but I'm gonna dive into that just a little bit further. But before we get into that, just a little bit minor things I want to bring up in today's video, which are things that are kind of interesting. First and foremost, Grok 3 has now hit the show stage of being... Grok 3 is currently out for free. So, I mean, if you want to go test it out, you can. It's that are free. However, a lot of people have brought up the price for using Grok 3 afterwards, and that is a price tag and a half. So, why I bring this up is because next video I make might be something in lieu of Grok 3 being out. We shall see, though. And also, to go along with that bit of news, there's also news of a person who goes by Lindsey Graham pushing a bill through the Senate that includes $48 billion to Ukraine, which is quite interesting, seeing as how what has all been happening in America in stopping the funding of outside countries, and then this person here, Graham, is just trying to push $48 billion through. It's a little bit insane, if you might call that. And now we get into today's larger topic, which is, for the first portion, is Pierre Poilievre talking about how he is doubling down. He says, why I'm doubling down. Everything conservatives said before the tariffs is even more correct now. Axing the carbon tax, scrapping the capital gains tax hike, repealing the anti-energy law C-69, approving pipelines, and celebrating, not canceling, our history. These made sense before, they are absolute necessities now. And I agree with him on that. I absolutely agree with him, especially with the things have been popping up about Mark Carney and how he, once again, bring up that two-faced thing again. He would speak in French in one place saying, oh, we're gonna boost the economy, we're gonna open pipelines and all that kind of talk, and then in the very next portion of a speech, he's talking out of his other mouth and saying, oh no, we will not force provinces to open up their pipelines. And so, this is absolutely a necessity to be talking about axing the tax still. It is a necessity to keep on talking about it and how that is going to happen, because it is something that is more evidently needing to be talked about, because clearly Mark Carney will not do such a thing. Which I will personally bring up here is how it is with him talking about it is important that he is doubling down on this. I agree, I'm with it, but I think the more important thing that is being noted here is how it is quite obvious as to how people are not talking about Ruby Dalla's ideas. And I mean, you guys know it, I already know it, that it was kind of... The election hasn't happened yet for the Liberal election. However, it is kind of blatantly obvious as to who's going to win that election, be it actually elected or not. But it is that Mark Carney is chosen to win. I'm still in support of Ruby Dalla winning that election, if it is an actual election, in which case I hope she wins, because she would actually provide a marginal problem for Pierre Poilievre being elected, because she might actually, if she follows through with what she says, might actually be a cornerstone in being a force of change in Canada. Now, anywho, I'm gonna dive into a little bit more of what I want to talk about here, which is our, how shall I put it? Our esteemed Resigned leader, for some reason, announcing a $4 billion with a 6-year project to build a high-speed rail. Our Resigned leader is talking about expensive things, like $4 billion in 6 years, like, and it's a high-speed rail from Toronto to Quebec City. I'm sorry, 6 years for that to happen? Really? You think that is gonna happen in 6 years? Right. 6 years. My tush. That would never actually happen in 6 years. You know it, I know it, everybody else knows it, that is a load of horse manure. Would absolutely never happen. And so, as government.exe is correct, says down below, they say, the government of Canada says $4 billion and 6 years, so the true cost and time will be closer to $50 billion and take 15 to 20 years. And I have to say, 15 to 20 years sounds a whole lot more realistic in terms of actually building that kind of railway than 6 years. Now, here, let's just let us listen to Trudeau say it himself.
The largest infrastructure project in Canadian history. A high-speed rail network between Quebec City and Toronto, with stops in Trois-Rivières, Laval, Montreal, Ottawa, and Peterborough. It'll span 1,000 kilometers with 100% electric trains that will reach speeds of 300 kilometers an hour. A reliable, efficient, high-speed rail network will be a game changer for Canadians, slashing travel times by half, getting you from Toronto to Montreal in 3 hours. It'll stimulate our economy, strengthen the bonds between cities and our two most populous provinces, and reduce costs for businesses while improving their productivity and competitiveness. It'll turbocharge our entire economy, create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs, and open new opportunities for Canadian businesses at every link of our supply chain. With Alto, we're investing for Canadians, and we're investing in Canadians. It's a project fit for Canada, big and bold.
So, take a note of that. He's able to spend he's able to spend $4 billion, quote unquote, while he's a resigned leader, and yet for some reason he can't call an early election. But he's still able to spend our money willy-nilly. I don't understand what it is about the Liberal government that they like about spending our money over here, there, over there, and they use flashy terms like fully electric. Fully electric. How are you getting that power? Oh, solar panels. Oh, how are you getting those solar panels? Oh. You know, fully electric. It's just so stupid as to how he's able to spend our money while being a resigned leader. It is that double speak once again. Talking here, but also talking there at the same time. Guys, I'm gonna resign now. Oh, by the way, we got a $4 billion railroad project we'd like to have here. Now, on good news, depending as to how you see this, apparently there is... I'll let this play out for you guys and come up with your own conclusions in your mind here. First, I'll just read out the text. Democracy Watch announces they're filing charges against Trudeau over SNC Lavalin because the RCMP won't.
Given the evidence and given as well that the RCMP did not apply the correct legal standard in terms of reviewing the evidence and determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, and also given that the RCMP did not consider in its investigation whether the Prime Minister or anyone else had committed a breach of trust, Democracy Watch is today filing an application in Ontario Court of Justice for court approval to pursue a private prosecution of these allegations of obstruction of justice and breach of trust.
They're filing an application for this to happen in the courts, so it may not go through either way. But I think the other thing that is to be made note is they're making a, private prosecution. So what does that mean? Well, down in the comments there are people who are thinking, oh, it's going to be thrown under the rug and no one's going to hear about it. It's going to be a prosecution, but nothing is going to happen from it. But on the other hand, it's like, if it was just going to be thrown on the rug, why would they even call it in the first place? Why would they even want it in the first place? So, I'm kind of interested to see where this goes. If it goes anywhere that is, it's a little bit interesting to see. Now, that was just a little thing I wanted to show y'all to see what is going on. But on other news, we got ourselves once again Mark Carney speaking from over here and then speaking from over here. As Pierre Poilievre points out, which this is something I myself talked about just a little bit. I gave you a summation as to what it is, but he had a conversation. He said, speaking in English in BC last week, Carney says he will use emergency powers to force through big national projects. Speaking in French in Quebec, he said he would not force provinces to accept pipelines. So clearly, now let's look at the video first.
And something that my government is going to do is to use all of the powers of the federal government, including the emergency powers of the federal government, to accelerate the major projects that we need in order to build this economy and take on the Americans.
Before we get into the French portion of that, I feel it is necessary to bring up how Pierre Poilievre says don't believe him in any language. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. However, I will make note. He's in the statement. Pierre says, speaking in English BC last week, Carney says he will use emergency powers to force through big national projects. I want to make the note. He brings up talking about the Emergency Act. As I noted in the other video, he brings up talking about the Emergency Act while also talking about going against America. I'm making that note because technically he didn't say anything about pipelines. Now, clearly that would be the assumption through talking about boosting our economy to power through those jobs, to get those things done, to boost our economy. That would be expected, but technically he never said specifically pipelines. I don't wanna, I already made the call last time, but I don't want to say it too much because, you don't want to speak it to existence, But him talking about the Emergency Act, he was talking about it while also talking about going against America. Once again, why would you need the Emergency Act for something that for things that neither Ruby Dalla or Pierre Poilievre thought it was necessary to bring up the Emergency Act for? It is that final caveat as to why I believe he brought it up, which is going against America. I put quotations there even though I don't think I quoted him properly, but I'm just bringing note to this. Technically, he never talked about pipelines when talking about the Emergency Act. You don't need an Emergency Act for that to happen. just bringing that up. Now, in this final video I'm going to bring up, not going to go for it long, because it's a whole 2 minutes, and I'm not going to go over the entire thing. But the point is to bring to note of how, once again, Mark Carney speaks on this side of his mouth, and then speaks over here with this side of his mouth. He is, as the new sloganeering is going on, Carney is sneaky. He likes to speak in two sides of his mouth. He doesn't like to say anything straight. And so, just take a look at this, okay?
You listened to Pierre Poilievre yesterday, as you probably did. He didn't mention the provinces once. He never mentioned First Nations. He acted as if it's just his decision to fly in somewhere and decide which pipeline happened.
Bring home production to this country, and that's what we will have. My common sense plan to unleash the production of our resources will allow us to be self-sufficient. We will incentivize Indigenous leaders to support these projects by letting companies pay a share of their federal corporate taxes to local First Nations. Second, I'm announcing, and by the way, that will allow First Nations to spend that on clean drinking water and a better future for their people.
Okay, I have to bring, that's actually bringing a cut off that clip. You know, that was a little bit of a, just thing that peaked in my brain. It's like, you know what, that's where I'm going to cut it off. But okay, first things I want to bring up, didn't Trudeau say something very similar to talking about clean drinking water when it comes to the First Nations? Let's see if that actually follows through with Pierre Poilievre being elected. But to continue, it is the clip continues, and it is quite obvious he does talk about the provinces. He does talk about First Nations. He does talk about them. And so Carney is saying a bunch of hoopla. He's saying a bunch of nothing. He is saying things without actually knowing things. But that works in today's world, where a lot of people are not exactly, they are quote-unquote educated. And so they don't know these things. They don't go out of their way to learn about these things. They don't go out of their way to listen to these things, to understand the full context of things. And so we have a lot of people who will listen to Mark Carney and be like, oh my goodness, Pierre Poilievre didn't talk about them? How dare he? Without ever looking at it, without ever checking on it, without ever doing this, that, or the other thing. They'll just take what he says for fact. And that is quite obvious just in the mere fact that he has actual voters. People who are voting for him. That's insane. So, clearly, he's got people who don't learn, don't listen, don't look, don't do any of that. They are ignorant. And so, it works. Hopefully not for the majority of people, but it does in fact work. Hopefully, there's enough Canadians that are waking up during these times, and they're like, hey, this is a load of horse stuff. This is not good. And they don't listen to him, and they go away from him. Hopefully. But that is just about where I'm going to leave things off for today's video. Tell me what you guys are thinking down below. Comment, subscribe, like, all of those typical YouTuber talk stuff. But anywho, I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, I hope that you have a good one.